Look at your arm for a second. Really look at it. There is some hair there, sure, fine, sparse, mostly decorative. Now think about what is underneath it. Exposed skin, completely vulnerable, no fur, no thick coat, no insulation. Nothing between you and the cold, the sun, the insects, and the rain, except a layer of tissue roughly as thick as a credit card. Every other primate on Earth is covered. Chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans, baboons, all of them carrying dense coats of fur that protect them from the elements, regulate their temperature, and shield their skin from abrasion and ultraviolet radiation. They look at you, and by every standard mammalian logic, you are the strange one. You are, by any objective measure, a nearly naked ape. And for most of human history, scientists had no convincing answer for why. The best current estimate, based on genetic analysis of the MC1R gene by researchers including Alan Rogers and colleagues, places the loss of body fur at roughly 1.5 million years ago, though the precise timing remains debated. The question is, what happened that made losing it not just survivable, but necessary? Because evolution does not give things away for free. If the fur went, something valuable had to replace it. It did. Several things, in fact. And the answer, when you follow it all the way through, reveals that what looks like a vulnerability is actually the single most sophisticated thermal engineering system in the entire primate world. Here is what actually happened. The oldest explanation, and still one of the most actively debated, starts with where our ancestors went when they left the forest. Around 2 million years ago, the climate in East Africa shifted, forests contracted, open savanna expanded. Our ancestors, who had spent millions of years in the shade of dense canopy, suddenly found themselves moving through open grassland, in direct equatorial sunlight, covering ground across terrain, with almost no shade at all. The environment had changed completely. The body had not caught up yet. And that gap between what the environment demanded and what the body could deliver became one of the most consequential selection pressures in human evolutionary history. A chimpanzee struggles to maintain pace for long in that environment, not because it lacks the legs, but because it overheats far more rapidly than a human does. Dense fur that works perfectly in forest shade becomes a serious liability in open sun. The internal temperature climbs, the muscles fatigue. The animal has to stop and find shade. Our ancestors needed to cover distance. Persistence hunting, the strategy of tracking prey at a slow jog across hours and kilometers until the animal collapses from heat exhaustion, only works if the hunter can stay cooler than what it is chasing. And the most effective way to shed heat while moving is to sweat, not the limited sweating other primates are capable of. True whole-body sweating across the largest possible surface area, with nothing trapping heat against the skin and nothing blocking airflow across it. Fur blocks that airflow. Fur holds heat against the body. Fur is, thermally speaking, the enemy of a long-distance runner in equatorial sun. The animal that could shed heat faster than its prey could run longer, hunt more successfully, and feed its offspring more reliably. Over generations, that advantage compounded. The coat thinned, the sweat glands multiplied, the endurance increased, so it went. But losing fur created a serious new problem immediately. Bare skin in equatorial Africa is exposed to ultraviolet radiation intense enough to damage DNA, degrade folate, a nutrient critical for fetal neural development, and produce mutations that compromise reproduction entirely. The animal that lost its fur without a compensating adaptation would face a different kind of extinction, slower than starvation, but just as final. The compensation was melanin. As fur density decreased, melanin production in the skin increased. Researchers examining the genetics of human skin pigmentation have found that the variants associated with dark skin in African populations are extremely ancient, far older than the variants associated with lighter skin that emerged as populations moved into higher latitudes. This tells us that the ancestral human skin tone, the baseline from which all modern variation descends, was deeply pigmented, dark enough to function as a biological sunscreen, dark enough to protect the folate stores that kept reproduction viable under open equatorial sun. The sequence was not random. It was a precise biological trade. Fur reduced, Sweat glands multiplied. Melanin increased. Each step interlocked with the others. Remove any one element and the whole system collapses. This was not an accident of random genetic drift. This was coordinated adaptation under enormous selection pressure, happening fast by evolutionary standards, over hundreds of thousands rather than millions of years. But thermoregulation is only the first layer. There is a second hypothesis that does not replace the heat argument. It runs entirely alongside it and addresses a completely different pressure. And it explains something the thermoregulation argument alone cannot: why the hair that remained stayed exactly where it did. Parasites. Dense fur is an ideal habitat for ectoparasites. Lice, ticks, fleas, and mites all thrive in the warm, humid microenvironment that a thick mammalian coat creates close to the skin. For most mammals living solitary or semi-solitary lives, this is a manageable cost of having fur. But humans are unusual in one specific way that changes the calculation entirely. We sleep in the same place repeatedly. Hunter-gatherer groups returned to campsites. They built shelters. They used bedding. A socially dense population returning to the same location night after night creates exactly the conditions in which ectoparasite loads can build to genuinely dangerous levels over time. Ectoparasites are effective vectors for serious pathogens across many species, and dense fur gives them the ideal environment to establish and persist. Bare skin denies them that foothold entirely. Researchers studying the ectoparasite hypothesis have pointed to something that makes it very difficult to dismiss. Humans did not lose hair uniformly, they lost it strategically. The head retained it, protecting the brain from direct overhead sun. The armpits and groin retained it, where dense concentrations of apocrine glands produce chemical signals carrying biological information about health and genetic compatibility. The exposed zones, the back, the chest, the limbs, are precisely the zones where a parasite has nowhere to hide and nowhere to anchor undetected. This is not what random fur loss looks like. Random fur loss produces patchy, inconsistent reduction with no coherent pattern across the body. What humans have is deliberate-looking architecture, and architecture in biology is almost always the signature of selection pressure, working consistently in one direction across many generations. The pattern itself is the argument. There is a third element that almost never enters this conversation: social display. Skin is visible in a way that fur is not. Skin flushes when blood flow increases. It pales under stress. It bruises, scars, and marks. It communicates health status, emotional state, and physical history in real time in ways that a fur coat permanently conceals. As human social groups became more complex, as cooperation became more critical to survival than individual strength alone, as the ability to read another person's internal state became genuinely valuable to the group, bare skin became a communication channel that dense fur would have kept permanently closed. Blushing is involuntary and cannot be faked. Pallor under fear is automatic. Fever is visible in the face. Jaundice, anemia, injury, arousal, all of them write themselves onto bare skin in signals that a group member can read from across a clearing. A chimpanzee wearing a full coat cannot broadcast this information to the animals around it with any real precision. A human being cannot suppress it even when they want to. In a species that survived by cooperation and collective decision-making, the ability to signal physical and emotional state honestly and continuously to the group was not a side effect of losing fur. It may have been one of the driving reasons fur became worth losing in the first place. Honest signals only work when the signaling surface is visible. Fur hides the surface entirely. Bare skin makes it impossible to conceal very much at all. The fur did not disappear because of one pressure. It disappeared because of at least 3 simultaneous pressures, all pointing in the same direction: thermoregulation, parasite resistance, and social signaling, each one making nakedness slightly more advantageous than the alternative across enough generations that the coat eventually stopped coming back. Look at your arm again. That fine, sparse hair you glanced at when this video started is the remnant of a coat that covered every direct ancestor you have ever had across tens of millions of years of primate evolution. The skin underneath it is the result of a biological trade so precise and so coordinated that it required enormous pressure from 3 separate directions at once to complete. You are not an ape that lost its fur. You are the animal that exchanged fur for the ability to run farther in the heat, resist parasites more effectively, and communicate your internal state to the people around you with a clarity no other primate on Earth can match. The naked skin is not what went wrong in your evolutionary history. It is the thing that went most precisely right. Every other primate is still wearing the coat you gave up roughly 1.5 million years ago in exchange for becoming the most widely distributed, most cooperative, and most environmentally adaptable large mammal on Earth. The bare skin on your arm is not the vulnerability. It never was. It is the evidence of everything you became, and a record of everything every primate that still wears its original coat has not yet had the pressure to become.